So minor spoiler warning before we get started here, as I will be talking about a few game mechanics, in this case a skill tree I think I want to call it, that will likely be unlocked through certain actions that a player decides to take, and these actions are tied to mostly the earlier part of Act 1, but maybe the mid to later part depending on how you play. Now if that worries you at all, I'll catch you on the next video, but actually you can also just take your finger and scroll the video over to where I purely talk about the new skill tree. I will leave chapter markers below. Alright, let's jump right into it. So those of you who played Baldur's Gate 3's early access and decided to use your dialogue Illithid tadpole powers on certain NPCs in the game, which basically forces them to comply with you.
A strange symbol glows marked on their flesh, and something within you stirs in response.
You're a true soul. My mistake, sir.
You would have likely also experienced a few dream sequences when back at your camp, when you take a long rest. Now, once you've used these Illithid dialogue powers 3 times, I believe, but actually I think they changed that, but regardless. And do note that all players have access to these Illithid dialogue powers, but the choice is up to you if you want to use it or not. You'll then get a special dream when you go back to camp and take a long rest. And in this particular dream, if you give in and don't resist the mysterious voice and figure that's offering you help, seducing you, and tempting you with great power, you'll then wake up from that dream with some new special Illithid tadpole powers. But these are actual actions that go on your hotbar and can be used in combat, and some of them recharge on a short and long rest, and others recharge on a long rest. In early access, your class choice will determine the specific type of Illithid power that you end up getting. For example, fighters get this psionic pull, rogues get ink blot, which basically creates darkness around them, letting them hide. Wizards get a reflective shell, druids can turn into intellect devourers, which is actually quite fun, and clerics get this power that basically stops a friendly creature from going unconscious at 0 hit points and instead heals them, etc. Well, for the full version of the game, Larian Studios seems to have changed this system up a bit, as I was going through some of the B-roll footage that I have, and I found a scene with a brain Illithid power skill tree. And to access this interface, just to the top left of where the minimap is, you can see this clickable button with a little tadpole symbol on it. When you click on that button, the game will then bring you to this interface, which is actually meant to be your character's brain. Now, on the right side of this interface, you can see a picture of a tadpole, and it says ×1 in it, which in simple terms, of course, is just saying that you have a point available to invest into a particular area of your mind that you want to evolve. And to do this, all you have to do is drag and drop that tadpole, your ×1 tadpole, onto the particular Illithid power that you want to obtain. Now, before I go over all of the powers that were revealed to us, let's take a look at how this character obtained a tadpole in the first place. So this scene right here is a scene you can find fairly early on in Act 1. And there's this character named Edwin who you end up having a true soul connection with, but Edwin ends up dying on the ground in front of you. In early access, a tadpole would then squirm out of Edwin's eye and scurry away if you didn't destroy it in time. But in the full version of the game, it's a bit different. Do quickly take note of the Dragonborn's cloak right here, though, as cloaks are a thing in the full version of the game, and I'm super hyped about it. So when this player loots Edwin, now you can see a little vial in his inventory that's called Mind Flayer Parasite Specimen. And looting this particular item awards the player with a tadpole. And looting this item also lights up that tadpole Illithid power button that we talked about earlier up near the minimap. It lights it up in red, and this lets the player know that they have a point to spend, or should I say a tadpole to use. Now it's time for the fun part. Let's take a look at some of the descriptions of a few of these Illithid powers that we actually got to see. But first, take note that some of these Illithid powers are locked, specifically the ones on the outside of the brain right here. And according to Fextra Life, this kind of works in like a quadrant system. So like you invest into one skill and then you go a little bit further. And then if you invest in that quadrant, maybe it unlocks the ones on the outside. But I don't know exactly how it works, but it's something along those lines. So let's start off with this first skill right here, which is called Favorable Beginnings. And do note that this is a passive feature. So you have passive features and also class actions, and class actions are the ones that you actually have to activate on your hotbar, while passive ones that, work actively in the background or will automatically go off. So favorable beginnings is described as the first attack roll or ability check you make against any target gains a bonus equal to your proficiency bonus. So your proficiency bonus in Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be +2 until you reach level 5, then it goes to +3. At level 9 it goes to +4, and that's a pretty big boost to the first attack roll that you make or ability check. So this could also be used in dialogue. I'm assuming that there's a limit to the use of some of these passive features, maybe not this one. Perhaps any time that you make that first attack roll or ability check, you're always getting that proficiency bonus increase, but it doesn't say anything in the description, so we're going to have to wait and see. And the next skill is called Charm, which is also a passive feature. Channel the dark allure of the tadpole to charm an enemy that attacks you, preventing them from attacking you until their next turn, and this is a reaction. So basically, if I was going to guess how it would work, you can go into your reaction interface and toggle this on and off if you want it to be something that pops up in front of your face when an enemy attacks you, and then you choose if you want to use it in the moment, or have it be something that just goes off or something that never goes off. Now, it's important to note that when you use this, the creature is not going to attack you, but they could attack someone else. So if you're like a tanky character, you might not want to use this, because then you're sending that enemy on one of the squishier party members of yours. So just something to keep in mind. And then the next skill is also a passive skill called Luck of the Far Realms. When you make a successful attack roll against a foe, you can change that hit into a critical hit. Now, a feature like this, a passive feature like this, I feel like it has to have like a cooldown, either once per short rest or once per long rest. And Fextra Life kind of hinted at that as well in a video that he did a few days ago, because this is just really powerful. If you're able to just change your attack rolls to critical hits every single time, that would just be insanely powerful. That wouldn't make any sense. So I'm assuming there's a limit to this, and maybe it's just once per short or long rest. Either way, really cool to know that you have this ability to make that critical hit when you really, really need it, because critical hits are double the damage. Moving on to the next skill, we now have Perilous Stakes. This is a class action. So the class actions you have to actively activate on your hotbar. And this is a healing Illithid power. Invest a creature with power that heals it when it attacks, but also makes it vulnerable to all damage. And this lasts for 3 turns, has a 9 meter or 30-foot range, and recharges on a long rest. And the healing is 2 to 16, at least at this particular level. It's important to note that if you use this on a creature, I don't think you can use it on yourself according to the description. When that creature attacks, of course, they're going to be receiving healing, but if they take any damage, they are vulnerable to that damage, meaning they're going to be taking double the damage. So definitely situational, but can certainly be powerful in the right situation. For example, a player that has really good positioning could be dishing out damage and healing themselves with this power, and then also hiding afterwards. And the next class action is Shield of Thralls. Conjure a volatile shield around yourself or an ally, granting the target 10 temporary hit points. And those hit points can last until a long rest, but I'm assuming if you deplete these hit points in combat or whatever, you don't get them back. Don't know the exact description of this skill, though. It's also important to note that you can't have temporary hit points from multiple sources. So if you have another skill that you plan on using to give a character temporary hit points, you probably don't want to use Shield of Thralls on that character. Now, one thing you can do with this, if you want to use it a little bit more passively, is when you come out of a long rest, just cast Shield of Thralls, get that 10 temporary hit point boost, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore, and you have a character that's buffed up a little bit more. Or you can use it situationally and in combat itself, but it does cost an action. All right, so moving on to the next one, and that does recharge on a short rest, it said. Next one is called Concentrated Blast, and this does 6 to 36 damage, 3d6 psychic, 3d6 conditional. Barrage a foe with rending psychic might. You must be concentrating on another spell to cast this spell. Concentration is broken upon cast, and we have a 9 meter or 30-foot range. And this can keep going on each turn, according to the description here. Now, the interesting thing about this class action, this Illithid power, is you have to be concentrating on another spell for it to become available for use. So if you're playing as a cleric and you have Concentrated Blast, it's probably going to be grayed out until you cast a spell like Bless or something like that, and then you can actually use Concentrated Blast. But according to the description, concentration is broken upon cast. So if you just casted Bless with your cleric, you probably don't want to use Concentrated Blast, because then you're going to lose less. So there's definitely some situations where this could be useful. Right off the top of my head, I'm thinking if you really need to get damage on a creature, especially a creature that may be, resistant to a bunch of different damage types and you need that psychic damage, or perhaps you take this on a character that doesn't really have that many damage type spells, and having this in your arsenal to be able to switch to have more damage could be useful in situations where, you're really trying to just hammer down a boss or something like that and you're not playing as defensively. Moving on to ability drain, but actually it looks like we scrolled over one on the way there. Or did we? Yes, we did. So Psionic Overload, which is one that the character already took, and I believe it's this skill right here. This is a class action. You deal an additional 1 to 4 psychic damage with weapon attacks, but receive 1 to 4 psychic damage per turn, lasts for 10 turns, recharges on a short rest. So in a situation where dishing out damage is more important or more valuable than taking some damage, this could be a nice skill to have. And the next one is called Ability Drain, which is the actual skill that this player invests into. And this is a passive feature. Once per turn, when you make an attack roll, the attack reduces the target's corresponding ability by 1. The ability that is reduced is the same as the one used to make the attack roll. So for melee weapons, this tends to be strength, ranged weapons, dexterity, and then spells, it goes off of your spellcasting ability. So if you're using a two-handed sword and you're on the front lines and you attack an enemy, it's going to drain their strength. If you're an archer in the back and you're shooting your bow, it's going to drain that character's dexterity ability by 1. Now, I don't know if this just keeps stacking and stacking and stacking. It does say per turn, so it must be to at least a certain extent. I don't know if there's limits on it. You could use like your archer to focus down on this one beefier character and slowly drain down their dexterity ability score, and then use one of your casters and have them cast a spell that requires that creature to do a dexterity saving throw, of which they're much more likely to fail because your archer was draining their dexterity ability. So there's to be some interesting synergies that you can use with this passive feature, but the extent of its use, I just don't know. And the next one that we got to see is called Stage Fright, or it should be called, yes, it's called Stage Fright, and that is a class action. Your targets have disadvantage on attack rolls and take 2 to 12 psychic damage each time they miss, and this can last for 3 turns. But note that if your opponent succeeds on a wisdom save, it appears as if they can resist Stage Fright completely, and also for them to overcome their Stage Fright early, so it doesn't take effect for all 3 turns. If they succeed on an attack roll, the Stage Fright will go away. But note that they have disadvantage on their attack rolls, so it's going to be pretty hard for them to succeed on that attack roll and end it early. So pretty cool ability, and the name Stage Fright I think really fits well here. Like if you're on stage and you mess up, then you get embarrassed and your nerves kick in and you just keep messing up and messing up and messing up. In this case, you take psychic damage for 3 turns, 2 to 12 psychic damage. So pretty cool Illithid power there. And now we have Perilous Stakes, which we already talked about, so I take it back. I think this is actually it, and now the player actually invests into the ability drain passive feature, which we will not see on the hotbar because it is a passive feature. You can see the little animation of the tadpole squirming into the brain, and you'll notice there is no icon for ability drain because it's a passive feature, but we do see an icon for the other 2 Illithid powers that this character already has taken, which means that this player has found 3 tadpoles so far in their adventure here early on in Act 1. So that's interesting to think about. How many tadpoles will there be in total? How rare are they going to be? Etc. So there's still a lot of questions about how this is going to work, and also what happened to those class actions that we have in early access, the ones that I showed you guys in the beginning of the video. I have no idea. Perhaps those actions are on the outer part of the brain. Perhaps they're still class associated, so like your monk's brain is going to have, different ultimate Illithid powers than like your sorcerer's brain. I don't know. There's a lot to think about, but really cool that we have this extra skill tree to now focus on top of our own character. Larian Studios seems to be doing a lot to make, character development a little bit more interesting in this game, because in 5th edition it can be slow and also underwhelming if you come from, other types of video games where you're leveling up all the time and just getting a ton of things. It seems like Larian's really trying to make character development and progression quite fun in this game with the weapon abilities, the Illithid powers, the classes, etc. Thank you all so much for watching. Plenty of more Baldur's Gate 3 videos to come, and also live streams right here on this channel, and I'll catch you on the next one.